All right, so you want to compress your irons. Well, compressing your irons means you need to control the club face. Controlling the club face means that you need to control your lead wrist. Now, most golfers, they destroy their lead wrist and they destroy their control of the club face in the first moments of the golf swing. We want to talk about that because this is so critical to getting you set up for success that the rest of your swing just wants to happen. All right, guys, so let's dive into the lead wrist. We're going to be using the HackMotion here today. I've got it set up right here on my phone, and we're going to break down a few concepts that I think are really critical. And we want to get you started on the proper backswing here, getting that club going back where we have this lead wrist in control. But before we start getting up into the backswing, we're going to take it up to about P3, which is this lead arm parallel to the ground. Because again, that is such a critical point of the golf swing that people get wrong. But we do need to establish what do we want to see with our lead wrist at address so we know how it's going to move. And I think the biggest thing here is people are going to think, oh, well, Scott, you're going to tell me I want to have like a flat lead wrist. You want this, you want this. Why can't I just lock that in and make this happen? It really doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, other body parts are moving that have some influence on how your wrist moves. So it's not going to be the most powerful, and quite frankly, it just doesn't work. So you are going to want to learn how to properly move that lead wrist in your swing. So let's start with just what are we talking about in terms of the lead wrist. So if I'm looking at it here, and I'm going to set us up, let's get a live look here. So if you can see, I'm kind of here just holding my wrist. If I go up, this is what we call extension. We're looking at this part of the wrist. If I go down, that's called flexion. You're going to have radial. You'll have ulnar. And you can see those numbers changing on the HackMotion. And then you also have rotation, which we don't have in the live view, but we'll have some graphs for that. But you have rotation, you have what's called supination, you have pronation, and that's true for both arms and both wrists. So those are critical things to know because as you're moving, you want to make sure you're moving the proper direction. So when we get set up, everybody says, hey, I need to have this flat lead wrist going throughout the swing. Well, they get set up and they try to make their wrists flat at address. And so they try to get into some sort of flexion at address. And that's why what happens to a lot of people is we see some really bad grips. We see grips that are too far in the palm, and we're going to see too weak of a grip. Because they do that, when they do that, and you're putting yourself in flexion at the address position, you really have nowhere else to go. You've kind of maxed out your range of motion with your position. And so you have a weak grip, which is an open club face. And when you go through a swing, one of the things we have to do is control the club face, and we have to close the club face. And we do that a big way by adding flexion to our wrist. But you've already maxed out your flexion at address and the face is open. So you have not a whole lot of mechanisms left to close the club face and still deliver compressed, powerful iron shots. So we got to make sure at address that we are going to see some sort of extension in the wrist. Now, I tend to have a lot more extension in the wrist because I have a stronger grip. I just always have. I try to weaken it, and I work on that, but I do tend to have a little bit of a stronger grip. So you'll see my graph have a little bit more extension in the grip portion, okay? So we want to get to a position where we have extension. Now, that's critical because now what's going to happen is when we start taking this club back, what we have to realize, and as we look at players moving through the swing, is as we start to go back, the number one thing that people do in their swing is they start thinking, all right, hey, I need to get the club behind me, do something where they get the club back behind them so they can swing into out. What happens is they start to roll the golf club and they're rolling their forearms. Now, when I do that, okay, I'm going to just sit here. I've got about 8 degrees of extension. I'm going to just roll my arm, okay? Trying not to move my wrist, but if you try this at home, just naturally, as I pronate my arm, the extension value goes up. That's opening the club face. That's opening the club face, and if we take it down to the ball, that's adding loft, that's taking away compression. So we need to realize that what we're trying to do throughout the swing is when I get to the club, again, we have extension at address. As I'm going back, what we really want to see is I do not want to add extension, or if I do, it's extraordinarily minimal. And honestly, some of the best ball strikers, they are going to be putting a little bit of flexion up at the top. You'll see some people going to flexion up at the top of the swing, meaning they have that bowed type of wrist up there at the top. Think Dustin Johnson would be a fantastic example of that. So what do we see them doing? If you think about this, okay, so amateurs are rolling their wrists and getting this extension in their wrist, while pros are going more into, they're maintaining their extension or even going into flexion as you go here. And let's see, yeah, I am in flexion here as we go. So how are we doing that? Well, they're doing that by, one, they are supinating their lead arm. As they're going back, they're almost feeling their arm turn underneath as they go back. This motion is going to promote more of this flexion of the lead wrist. So if I do this with one hand, you're going to see I'm getting more. I still have a little bit of extension, I think, but it's not nearly as much as when I start. When I start, I got about 30 degrees or so. When I do this, now I'm down to 20. So again, I'm decreasing. I'm moving towards a flatter wrist. Even if it's not completely flat or flexed, I'm moving in that direction. That's the important part. And one of the key things I can do is work on the rotation of my arm and how I go back. You'll also notice that helps get the club to stand up more when we do that. I'm not trying to do anything with this golf club. You can see how it's standing up, but I actually have ulnar deviation in my wrist. So I'm actually doing more of this as I go, but the club is standing up, even though I feel like I'm going like this. I'm kind of keeping it flat. So I don't need to hinge it up a whole lot as we go. So we're moving from here and we're going all the way up to this P3. And what we're going to do is we want to feel that as I'm moving up, again, I'm keeping this arm more turned away from me, but also I want to feel that my lead wrist is going in extension, or sorry, getting out of extension. So what I'm going to feel is my lead knuckles start to twist away from me as I go. And if I can do that, so I bring it back, lead arm, knuckles back, all of a sudden what we're going to see is they're going to see a club face that's in a much stronger position. We're going to see a little bit of extension for me. Again, I'm about 20 degrees, 15 degrees here. That is because I have a stronger grip. If I give myself a weaker grip, but not too weak, let's go weaker. Now I should see, you can see that number's going down. Man, I'm gonna have to go really weak if I wanna get that. But I'm moving in the proper direction. Again, the goal here is not to necessarily say, hey, when you get to P3 of your golf swing, I need a super, super bowed wrist. But I need to see it less cupped. I don't want to get more cupped as I'm going back. And that's what I see people do all the time. Again, a lot of times it's because they're rolling that club flat with their arms, and then that puts their wrist into more extension. Now the face is way open, and now we've got to do some funny things, release, whatever, that's going to make it hard to compress the golf ball. So again, if compression is what you are looking for in your swing, it starts really early. First off, starts at address and understanding, hey, this is where we're going and where we got to start, but knowing where that journey is going to take us and why it's so important to understand that, hey, it's not a fixed position that we can just hold. We need to work our way through and understand where we're taking this golf club with some motion. All right, so how do you train this at home? Obviously, if you can get a HackMotion, I will link it down below. This is one of my favorite aids. It's easy. It's one of the easiest to use in terms of just turning it on, it works. But also, it's just really good for pretty much the most important part of the golf swing. But if you don't have one, obviously, or if you don't get it yet, one of the easiest things you can do is actually just take a golf tee. And so if you're wearing a glove, or in this case, I'm just going to use this I'm just using it with the HackMotion, but I'm sticking it kind of where my glove would be and going in. I'm going to stick that T in there. And so when I take my grip, I'm going to feel a little bit of pressure of the T hitting my wrist. But as I go back, what I want to do is feel that pressure get less. And I'll even see a little bit of space between the T and my glove. So as I go back, if I do this right, that's getting a little less pressure. And then I go up to P3, I actually have a little bit of space there as we go. So do it again. Now we're going to feel that. If I'm starting to feel a lot of pressure, honestly, it hurts a little bit. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying go do something that's going to hurt yourself, but you are going to feel a little bit of pressure and it's actually poking me a little bit. That means I'm going into that extension. If I roll, it's starting to hurt a little bit. That's going to tell us, hey, we are losing control of the club face early. We are getting into a position that's not going to promote compression, and we're going to have to figure it out with a lot more motion later in the golf swing when the club is moving even faster and it's harder to control. So that's a key final point here. Why do we worry so much from address to P3? Well, the golf club is moving the slowest, or it's in the most control, in my opinion, where you're going through your backswing and you have the ability to set yourself up so when you transition and get to the downswing, everything's just going to want to flow as we go. And so what I would do is I'm going to bring it up. Okay, so again, I feel a little less pressure. I'm going to do a little better job here. Let's go up, bring it down. Again, not feeling a lot of pressure, don't feel that. And then I can go through and hit a golf ball. Now, I will say this, be careful if you're going to hit a golf ball, because you do actually go into extension. We do go into extension through impact. So you will hit this. Okay, so be careful if you're going to do that. I'm going to do one more without it. I'll just do one with the HackMotion, just drilling this. And as we do this, you can see, hey, let's look at the tour player graph where, again, we're going to have some extension. Not saying you have to get to a completely flexed wrist like this up here at P3. Actually, that has a lot of issues that you're going to have. But we definitely don't want to go to more extension of that wrist. That's not what we see, because, again, we're going to set ourselves up as we go through the rest of that swing. So let's go ahead. Let's hit one. Bring it in. So I'm going to really try to get to there. Okay, felt pretty solid. I mean, 141 yards for like a half swing feel. And then let's go ahead. Let's just run through that graph here a little bit. So I'm going to just bring it down to extension. So I actually do have a tour player comparison here, so you can kind of see it. So one of the things I do struggle, because I do have that stronger grip and I don't like in my swing, you can see I tend to move a little bit into extension, but then I fight it and try to go back to flexion. So I tend to hit the golf ball high. That's the reason why, and it's something I'm working on. But I do a decent job of, hey, we're moving back the right direction by the time we get to the top, and then I kind of crank it down into flexion on the way down, and then you can see we release it, and now we're going back up to extension through that swing. So you can see I'm kind of moving in the right direction, just not nearly. This is a pretty extreme example of somebody that goes way into flexion. Not somebody I would necessarily copy, but just to show you the dotted line, that is a very long hitter and somebody that hits it really far, but they do they're kind of a freak athletically. So if you have any questions about it, please leave that comment down below. Again, work on this, start feeling that compression in your iron, seeing your loft come down 25 degrees of loft on a 7-iron. I like that. Launching lower, hitting 142 yards with not a lot of effort, and then we can get more compression, hit the ball farther. I'll link it down below to the HackMotion. Make sure you click that subscribe button if you're not a subscriber already, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace.